My first impression getting off the metro and turning around, my first impression was I saw regular buildings, so I wondered, well, I wonder where this place is. And then I turned around and I went, Jesus Christ. Literally, because it is awesome in scope and in size and in impact, even under construction. I'm up on the ticket, and this is the stairs we climb up. And remember, these are relatively new. But 1,000 years from now, they'll be like the ones I've climbed in some of the cathedrals. I think this may be as high as I can go since the stairs continue in the forward direction, go down. There's that building we saw from the park. Here's some close-up detail of what's on this tower. Here's the view looking down. And there's Montjuic, the Jewish hill. It's interesting to see how thin-walled these towers are. Bells in this church now will be electronic, I guess. At this intersection, we could take an elevator and go down, or we can go up higher. I'll go up higher. Now in a second tower. And we're looking through one of these portals, as well as the down-sloping component. I don't know if that has anything to do with movement of air. We'll use this as an opportunity also to see how these people live. The ones who can afford to be on top. I'm just going to pan down so we get a sense of what this inside of this tower looks like. I have to shoot through a grill, so it's a little bit strange. If it weren't for the fact that Gaudi is so absolutely renowned, certainly in Spain if not elsewhere, for his Art Deco, all of this would look very Disney-like. My first impression getting off the metro and turning around, my first impression was I saw regular buildings, so I wondered, well, I wonder where this place is. And then I turned around and I went, Jesus Christ. Literally, because it is awesome in scope and in size and in impact, even under construction. On the other hand, I thought to myself, this is an incredibly glorified, sanctioned by God, Watts Towers. Rick indicates that Gaudi was driven by, as his principles for design, three. One, the classics, by which I assume he means the classics of architecture, design and engineering and so forth, and religion, of course, and nature. And so here we have an example, and this is what I think is going to be the Art Deco point, is the nature of all this. This indicating some kind of plant, but down here you see what looks like a serpent, or at least a chameleon of some sort, perhaps. Maybe not. And here further down, a couple of devices that look like the pods of something that might be on top of a stalk. And here a close-up view of a statue of, I'm guessing it's Jesus, but I have no idea for sure. Could be one of the apostles, could be something else. It gives you an idea of the artwork here. It's interesting how a piece of wrought iron is used here as part of the engineering structure. There, part below. We'll take a look at it a little bit later just for fun. You can see how this wrought iron is used. It's interesting, something as plebeian. It's usually hidden inside the cement. We have a moment, we'll just take a look at how the stone is worked. Notice this, which is kind of, looks like it's been already messed up. This pebbly look, a little bit deeper pebbly look. Some of the stone outlined, if that's really stone, as opposed to cement, and I don't know. It's interesting how some of the design seems to be so simplistic and architectural, if you will. as opposed to what we're used to in churches. But then, of course, this will create perhaps a whole new standard of churches, you know. And here I'm shooting some perspectives just to do it, just because they're there. Even those buildings down there, of course, are Gaudi-like. The curves. Certainly, the old cathedrals had none of the technology for construction that we use today. And yet this church will still take 150 years plus to do. And notice that. Is that a drain? The vibrancy of these colors is magnificent. It's analogous, at least in my mind, to walking through a bland desert and all of a sudden seeing a spectacular cactus flower, or even a cactus bud. And yet here the counterpoint of this subtle blue, purple and blue, or aqua color. And the counterpoint between these two color choices. And I wonder how long these tiles on here that form this can last, and whether there's a strategy for repairing and restoration on a continuing basis, or whether it'll fall prey to the build and forget dynamic. These shots I'm taking are just as I move from one window to the other as I go down the stairs. And look at this detail, like some kind of bag that has burst a hole at the bottom. What does that symbolize? This tower is still very much under completion at the top. Sacrifice. Notice what from below would look like little flecks of gold, perhaps within the scales of that plant, if in fact it's supposed to represent a plant, with this glorious bud on top. Here's somewhat of a close-up of one of the buds. We've seen this before from up above. Notice the flowery petals out of cement. How long will they last? Notice how the sculpturing is done. Are those cracks seen from below representing folds in the clothing worn by the statue, or are they representing age? The type of perspectives, the views you have, the close-ups are just too much to not take advantage of. Notice those gold specks. Now here, notice the openings are these long, round openings, but somewhat like Archimedes' design, but Gaudian. I'm on a balcony suspended out over the side of the church, as you can see. Here I'll give you an interesting sense of the curvature of the towers. And a close-up of below of this statue here. It's eerie to be on this platform, this balcony extended out over the side of the church. But it certainly gives you a close appreciation. Gaudi anticipated this. Here's part of that road that we've been looking at all the way down. And no, that tower will rise considerably higher than what we see now. changed into a bigger spiral staircase. Is this a fascinating perspective or what? Looking up at this little window alcove that somewhat lights the stairwell, although there are lights built into the banisters, you can see. Shooting into the inside, of course, through a glass window.
Wow, into the church. Wow. Well,
from inside this stairwell of the stained glass. And if it seems foggy and not much seen, it's because I'm looking through glass. And here the graffiti people have already started. And I doubt that these are craftsmen leaving their mark. Anti-pigeon device. We're now at the bottom of the spiral, looking up. Okay, we're now inside at the Gloria Entrance, or the Gloria facade and the Paternoster, whatever that is. But it will be the main facade of the church when it's done. This section tells of the origin and the end of human beings. As I often do, we're standing at what would be the normal main entrance, and I'm going to pan across the nave down to the altar. Side. There's no easy way to give you a sense of the feeling inside this church. It is absolutely unique, and that's so an understatement. Now I want to go up and look at the detail. I'll skip shooting the right side since it's somewhat redundant, except for the detail I'll shoot later on. But here, every little nodule, like a mad comic book, is something you need to look at. Remember, the nature theme is the one you want to focus on. Everything you see, I think, will be reflective of something in nature. These, perhaps open pods that have spilled their seeds. Perhaps that's what the rays reflect, the spilling of seeds. These are my interpretations. Who knows? Now that's the area above the altar. I'm going to pan down for what you would see of the stained glass from the first entry. Now there are many panels that are of clear glass, and they have yet to be completed, of course. And now the right side. Notice the green-blue. My guess is that this may be thematic, as it was in either the church in Lyon or Burgos. And here the holy water is a shell. A symbol, I can't recall what that symbol is, but it also is the symbol of the Camino de Santiago trail. And here Gaudi has put on both sides a balcony that you can walk up to and sit and presumably contemplate what we're looking at. And we'll try to do that if it's accessible. I don't know what these devices are. They're related to the construction, probably for, well, obviously hauling something up or down. Why this design, I don't know. I'm just going to pan the two balconies, three balconies really, along the entrance wall, just so we've seen them. Notice the canopy-like effect. Now I'm going to do my pan down the left aisle. Notice the total irregularity and regularity of that balcony on the left, and these nodules you see in the columns. Also notice that far distant oval window is offset, or appears to be, blocked at least in part by that sloped column. Notice these plant-like joints that Gaudi has created as the spring points for his spreading supports for the balcony that you see there, which then supports that upper nave. Standing in the far left corner as you enter, shooting across the church diagonally to pick up the perspective of shooting through arches, which I love to do. All I can do here is keep trying to capture imagery. Here another set of nodules, I call it, joint nodules, including the one we had seen that was on the left earlier on is now the one on the right. But notice also the one in the back that's leaf-like. The lady who is the, for lack of a better term, one of the guards up near the front entrance, she and I were talking, and she brought me out to the center of the church and showed me that in here there are circles, and it may be that those that are in the wrought iron. But she said for 1 hour each day for 1 month, the sun hits them and illuminates them in a spectacular way. She says it's absolutely, her word was crazy, which is a substitute for amazing. I'm now looking back down the left aisle towards the entrance of the church area, just trying to pick up how that stairway in its scallop sculpture design fits in. As I pan vertically up, notice the absolute clear similarity to trees. And even perhaps more so plants. Okay, these are the colors of spring. The colors that suggest warmth. The green, probably growth. And they are to the south. Here on the north side, or the right aisle, are more green and blue, or cool colors reflecting autumn. I believe that is the choir's balcony up there, which holds, believe it or not, on both sides, 1,000 singers. This place has 1 organ and will someday have 4. This statue, which looks so much like Batman, is actually St. George, the patron saint of Barcelona. I don't see his dragon. It was interesting, my reaction to the stained glass from the get-go was how beautiful it is. And then I reflected later on how I've seen other modern stained glass that simply looked cartoonish. And here on the autumn side, a little bit closer view, mainly the greens. But here, duplicating the center panel on the left, I pick up all the blues. This is on the right aisle, of course, or the north. Here, I will try to give you a sense of what all cathedrals try to do with their columns, and that is force the eye visually up to the top. Okay, we're looking directly up above the altar. And I'll spiral down so you can see. Notice the curious location of the organ. Here, this canopy directly over the altar, seeming almost far too temporary, and maybe it is. I wanted to look at the dude that's up there working, just as the novelty. Now from the front of the church, I'm shooting back from the north side to the south side to pick up that stained glass. And hopefully we're getting some effect from the sunlight diffusing through this space. Now we're shooting the south part of the cross. Now we're looking at the right or the north part of the cross. I can't remember what its name is. From the north side of the nave. Now look at the entranceway. Didn't notice that before. Let's go in closely. It's so irregular, as though it were foliage. And notice the stairway. And notice the holes in those columns. You know they're columns. You know they allude to what you see in other churches. But why the holes? Some allusion to some kind of plant, probably. This detail behind the altar, about second tier up. No easy way to get a nice isolated shot at this distance with a video camera. This is just a little side chapel. There was some pretty stained glass. All of these shots are at the rear right behind the altar. Notice the coolness of these panels. Except down below it's hot. Does that represent hell? I don't have a clue. Now as I move behind the altar, which I have just done, we're now over on the south side. A little bit of a shift from the blue to the green and the orange there, perhaps. In that crypt, which is pretty much standard religious crypt, lies the body of Antoni Gaudi. This section is to the right of the north cross section. Again, notice the dominance of cool colors. This is from the close-up view of the south end of the crossover. Notice how totally different it is, how totally unclassical it is. Because now we're looking again at the north side of the crossover, but from across to on the south side of the church. Notice the allusion to the classical design of Gothic entranceway or archway. Here's something surely anticipated by Gaudi, and that is the sun striking this window section, which is to the left of the south end of the crossover as would be facing it from the inside. And yet directly opposite on the right side, as you're facing the south entrance of the crossover, this very beautiful cool panel, because there's no sun behind it, though the sun reflects on it through the window you saw a moment ago. It's interesting, as the camera view rises, it looks more and more to me of sensations I've had when you're walking through the woods and you come to the margin of the woods and the meadows and the light streaming in. Notice also the different columns. This is, I think, a porphyry they call it, but it's polished. It's purple. There are 4 of these here, I believe. And then you've got a gray basaltic, and then those white marbles. Again, as in a forest, you might see different colored trees. And here in the altar are these 2 decorative pieces of furniture, if you will. Like a candelabra with no candle in it. Don't have any idea why those 3 handles are hanging down. And then this pulpit book stand built into a rather simple book, or a simple pulpit, if you will. That's it, very sinuous and elegant looking, very Art Deco. This is the first chapel on the south side as you're coming down the south or left aisle. Notice the dominance of red on the left, and yet the sprinkling of all colors on the right. Interesting how the crypt down below is so classical. And maybe that's the point artistically, is that what he is creating that's so dramatic is built on the classical foundation of design engineering of such churches. Now a cynic might argue the purpose of this is to get the fat, indulgent, pampered priest up on to this pedestal so he can then waddle over to this altar and speak. I would never say such a thing. I'm just going to make a random pan, and then I will leave the interior forever. I pan down through this. Notice the rosaries hanging on the ceiling inside that arch and on the wall. And here I assume Joseph and Mary and some other guy. And here a Roman getting ready to do some serious damage. Oh, it's with babies, so that must be the slaughtering of the innocents. Very Hitlerian. And yet we idolize the Romans. One day will we idolize Hitler? Hitler didn't win though. I'm mainly focusing now in detail on the lower part of the church, and we'll back up to get the upper part. What you can say about this is how simple it is, easy to see what he's speaking about, keeps it very simple. Mary and Joseph and the baby, and here the three wise men. Here, of course, the right side of the church facade. Notice the almost pure Gothic design there, a little bit of Gaudiism maybe. Each one of these a thematic vignette of some sort, but this is interesting. This person over here actually making something, probably carving out a sign of some sort. Notice how this edge fairly drips like MacArthur Park. I think that's Jesus crowning Mary. Never knew that he did that. I wonder if there's any other religion that more fancifully has created its mythology. Some of the little balconies we were on earlier. These represent an expansion in this direction, of course, of the church. You can see a bunch of angle iron sticking out where it'll attach elsewhere up at the top. But also eventually, I believe, it's these apartment houses that will all be ripped out. So that there can be the grand esplanade down in that direction that Gaudi envisioned people would approach the cathedral from. It was on that tower to the left and the one behind it that we were walking earlier. And of course we got some really good detailed pictures of these finials up here. Again, looking at the side that on the towers that we went up. We'll take a little bit closer detail, but you can get an idea, first of all, how much higher this tower on the right is going to go. It'll be way above the ones that we were climbing up in, and we never got to the top of that. Now we're on the west wall, which looks very traditional, at least in this lower part, except that the arching spires, or spires with arches, are very spiky and have different kind of finial up on top. There's our two towers. We're migrating around from the south to the west and here to the north. I'm going to zoom in and get a close look at these finials. And now we'll go way up in the top of those towers that I was at this morning. And look at the finials up there from this north side. We'll go back to the park on the west side and look at them from there also. I've seen plants that have little balls hanging on them, clusters of them. Finials at the top of the towers, which we exited, are covered right now to protect them from construction. Look at how below the tower this design is very traditional for that little sub-building it looks like. And then we'll go on up and look at the tower. Just want to do the whole tower just a vertical. Just to orientate, I'm going to get the finial above this display. Okay, part of it's covered to protect it, but this one finial is left exposed so we can see what it looks like. We just entered into the big park area now, where we left it to go down that to see the Arc de Triomphe. And so now we'll just wander about looking at what looks interesting. A mix of industrial and playful. This may be Joan Miro's work. I don't know. I don't know whose work it is, but this is a homage to the exposition, Universal Expedition of 1888. Pathway is nice for walking, actually, when it's not muddy. This whole area, I don't know what it was initially for, but it's been nicely converted to both a picnic area as well as a little place for kids to play. Nice use of this. It's a nice feeling of openness, and yet there are places where you can go be in the shade. Feature, whatever it is. Wait till we get up close and personal with those horses up on top. And off to the left, a 19th century bandstand. And there are Castle of the Three Dragons. Let's go in tighter. Very pretty. The four horses are iconic all over Europe, at least. And, of course, in China. Terracotta Army had, I believe, a chariot with four horses. This guy got a heck of a bubble. It's the first time I've seen it last almost a minute now. There we go. Every park should have one. Don't know how far this water feature goes, but there's lots of boats for going. I wonder if I have any rights to their using my body as a model for their sculptures. Probably not. Some sections of parks seem like they're just used because they had to do something with the space, but they haven't quite figured out what it is that they're supposed to be doing with it. One time it had a real elegant purpose, and now it's just a remnant of its old self, kept somewhat alive. So down at that end of this big park is the Barcelona Zoo. Now we're looking back up to where we first came in. On the upper left above the trees you can see it, and then way down there the other tree. There's a circle of these pretty trees that we've seen before. I would call them larches, I think, that have the bark that flake off. But it's nice to see sometime in the past somebody had the vision of planting these and creating this circular little square, if you will, with the white pelican. And the white pelican is a symbol, I believe, of self-sacrifice, in that its mythology includes it sacrificing itself. The mother is sacrificing herself for her young. And this pretty building, either a arboretum, or however you pronounce that, for plants or for birds. I saw some pretty birds fly by. Now notice this parrot is tagged for some reason. Notice how much this seems to remind me, at least, of a combination of maybe Art Deco, but I don't really think so. More of the Romanesque church-like idea, and yet the feeling is very much like the 19th century marketplaces that you see, which would put it at an Art Nouveau, Art Deco design. These nice curves are certainly the Art Deco, Art Nouveau genre. I'm not much into for these kind of places, but they're neat, particularly if you happen to know what the plants are. I don't. I remember one place I went to that was like this. It was in China, and it was a butterfly place, for lack of a better term. And all throughout, as you walked around, all these different butterflies were flying around. Beautiful. This is either a school of geology or mineralogy or a museum for, but here on display are various kinds of marble and stone, basalt, calacara, famous marbles that have been used, I thought, in Rome, alabaster, basalt. Here's an interesting view of that building we looked at earlier that looked like a two-part greenhouse with that pretty enclosure that's not used, and then the tower of the Castle of the Three Dragons in the background. And if I've never seen a volcanic bomb, and I'm not sure I have, although I'm sure I have but didn't know I did, certainly the telltale flowing lines of lava. It's a pretty building, but not much use seems to be made of it. Pretty even in its unkempt form. Thought I ought to get some detail of these plaques. Not sure that I can tell anything from here. But it's a different approach to decorating a building. I haven't seen it before. Nice way to make a brick building come alive. Okay, we're back at the Elborn CC, whatever that is. I think it's the a market that was closed. It's a beautiful example of what you might see in the 19th century. Look at the date up there, 1870. In this beautiful space, and we'll take a look at it first. Imagine this, if it were a public market, which it's not, but if it were, with 2 floors, it'd be magnificent. It looks like a new building, and maybe it is. But what we're really looking at, apparently, are the foundational remains of what the city was like during the 1700s, during the War of Succession. At least this plaque beneath me refers to the succession, and it explains it a bit in English. What else this stands for, I haven't a clue, but we'll take a look at it, and if I have interest in the future, I can always research this, I suppose, using the video as a source of observation, as though I were visiting it at the time I'm doing the research. Now we certainly see a well there. Don't know what that pipe would be for. There, drainage for sewer, probably, like the Romans used. That area up there is more of the ruins. Behind me is, so we'll take a look at all of this, starting with this area down here. So this is an archaeological site, obviously, but in one of its benefits, there are society levels on top of levels. So beneath this are even more levels, but I can't get a grip on what exactly this is and why it's significant, other than it represents a prior time in the history of the city. The second thing is that apparently there are a great deal of remaining records of this area to provide archaeologists uniquely with great detail to support and to embellish and expand what it is they discover from an archaeological standpoint. If this sounds like BS, it is, because I haven't a clue what this site's for. To add some skimpy more detail, between the period of 1694 and 1714, that period of succession, this was the site of the earlier market. And this may well have been the original building. I can't get a clear sense of it. It seems to suggest in the literature that I saw that it is, that the space was that. So we're looking at simply Barcelona history from an archaeological viewpoint. So here we have La Casa de la Nu. So apparently this was a house right in through here that we're focused on. So these were ice houses. So when they say houses, they don't necessarily mean like we would literally interpret that as residence, but rather buildings. And this was in 1640 and 1690 that these were ice houses, indicating ice was indispensable for medical, for food, for cooling wine, refreshing drinks. And apparently the ice came from this place called Castellar-el-Col or whatever, and Montseny, and transported here in the back of mules, and then it was protected by layers of esparto grass, and then sold about the city in ice stores. Okay, and here you can see the section we're looking at. Notice these 2 parallel streets that go from lower middle to upper left. Street there, and probably that street over there, and then up there somewhere is another street, that cross street. Now again, imagine when the technology that enables virtual reality comes to full fruition. I will be able to look at this in full use. In other words, when it is in fact being used by people. That's what I'll appear to think, my brain will think it's seeing. And this will be the basis for reconstructing that virtual reality.
Són les que hem vist. Ara l'últim que en falta és veure aquesta zona d'aquí i des d'aquí anirem directament a l'exposició. Tanco aquesta paradeta.
Looking down into this well, I wonder what that hole is for. Must have brought water into that or drained it out. Now here are drawings of what is perceived to be extracted from this archaeological study. And a good example of what I'm talking about for the future is this drawing of a reweighing house of the market of Elborn. In other words, probably an idea of how it might have looked. And from this, you can imagine that any halfway decent animator can construct an extremely lifelike version of same. and expand that out to include the entire community. Now people it as you would in an animation movie, and you've got the virtual reality I'm talking about. Now it's up to the skill and the enthusiasm of that teacher or guide to somehow translate this ratty looking rock, this half destroyed whatever it is, into something that's alive and vibrant. Virtual reality will make her job extremely easier and excite and ignite the enthusiasm of those young minds. This is a picture of how the market in Delbourne would look like before this new market building that we're in. So let's see if we can't do a burns and get down closer into this and see what we're looking at. And maybe it was just a plaza with these shops around it.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the engineer was assisting construction, how to making some decoration.
So like I think no decorate.
Assisting construction, how to making some decoration.
So like I think no decorate.
You know whether the pavilion over there.
Dwell for a few moments on the intricacy of this metal lattice work, if you will.
The church is over the pavilion.
Here a painting of the original fish market that was incorporated into the new Elborn market when it was built in the 1800s. This is 1775. So notice, this is what you would have seen a year before our Constitution. Here on the right-hand side, I have a drawing of a structure for distilling brandy. And here we have the archaeological remains of that brandy distilling installation device in the Basador house, which presumably is one of these houses in front of us. But imagine if that detail there is a drain into, for example, that little water channel there. Here's what this space would have looked like again in 1775. It was an open plaza or market with stalls all around it. Notice the scales for weighing out whatever it is that they're selling there. Fish maybe, eh? Looks like it. Don't know what that red stuff is. Look at the clothing they wear now. It's one of the values of these kind of paintings is that it can tell you what people wore as normal clothing. Now here down at the far right of the market, let's go in a little bit closer. Don't know what that is. Some kind of shellfish or something? Just some detail for the fun of looking at it. There another drain. And over here, what were these three little cubicle areas for? Or did they just form the support for a bench? And that little raised area, was there a stove or something there? That gave greater insulation. Why would you need insulation on it? And what were these little pool-like enclosures with little stairs on them? Could that have been where you bathed? You sat on those little rock benches? They're small, but maybe enough. Here we see wells, and there water, little trenches or sewer lines, for lack of a better term. There, an entrance into a small little room. Everywhere we see those little round wells. Why are wells round? Notice the double wall. Was that just a double wall, or did it actually serve a function? See, we have the same over here. The defeat in 1714 by the Bourbons signaled the beginning of a tremendous suppression by the Bourbons of the Catalans, who had lost, including the execution of many and the exile of many. Another picture of the fish market. In addition to other Bourbon atrocities, Philip V decided to demolish 17% in essence of the homes and businesses of the area and build a giant citadel. This is the outline of it. Now we're down in this area. This apparently was a stream or river that flowed through this part of the city. Again, notice that well over there. Notice how these spaces are divided into irregular shapes and sizes. Look at that. And over here I noticed a curious feature. What is that? Was it a stove venting out to the right? Notice what looks like a well cover. Is that original? And these two depressions, and in particular that bowl-shaped one there, this mural is entitled The Chocolate Party, 1718. That's after the war. Let's look at some of the detail. Looks like dancing. Musicians. Here, one of our community fountains. Notice the fans, the dresses, the hair pieces, the hairstyles. Here a man serving some chocolate, hopefully. Ah, here they are preparing it. Dinner is served. Could these have been real people used as models? Apparently the balconies that we see today were an innovation of the 1700 era. Again, notice this appears to be basin-like rather than a well. So was it for a stove or hearth? And here a water channel. These drawings illustrating games like tennis, for sure. Here's some kind of croquette, it looks like. And here's some kind of billiards, it looks like. Now, playing archaeologist for a few moments, what are those parallel lines of little indentations? What were they caused by? What did they represent? And notice there, that goes down into the depression, so maybe these are just little pockmarks made by the archaeologists for some research reason. And notice in the walls, these holes, my guess is that they would have been for some poles or something that would offer some vertical support. Just a guess. But what would such a little space like that be for? And there again, a couple of our little indentations. Several, in fact. One there, and one way over there. Imagine life on this street, just like life we saw on the streets today. People going back and forth, doing what human beings do in a society to live, to do their day. The street we just looked at is named for its high concentration of the makers of strings for guitars and violas, which they produce from the guts of rams, wethers, ewes, and lambs. This print depicts the assault of the Bourbon troops on Barcelona. $40,000 against a quarter of that. You can imagine the horror as usually accompanied any defeat of a siege on the inhabitants. Looks like an oven. Now here we're looking at something interesting, a well, of course. Here, this well with a flat edge. Notice what that is. Any idea? Of course you do. With the sloping rocks, that's a wash basin for clothing, for washing clothes, as we've seen in various fountains in various cities. Notice that very carefully worked stone. What is it for? What is this for? Is that a little basin and those are a couple of drains, and that somehow the water drains down into one of these cavities here or flows out through there? What that was is a canal, not a river, but a canal for getting rid of the water, wastewater that flowed into the city from wherever they got it. And notice here that ark. What was the purpose of that? No idea what these are for, just interesting. I've seen this before, so this must have been some part I was wandering in today. Okay, now I'm at the other end of the pretty little square, for lack of a better term, as you exit out of Elborn, which is down there where that vertical orange post is. I think it's the back of the Iglesia, or church, of Santa Maria. The thing I like about Barcelona, and I think I saw this in Granada, is just one lovely little square after another. Can't see a way in, so I'm guessing it's closed right now. Although I think I may have seen enough churches. And streets like this just invite you to walk down them, don't they? This is pretty, just because the hint of secret little pretty places like that balcony up there. And the people who care enough to put plants like this out on their balcony, actually for others to enjoy more than themselves. And after my last comment, a little bit of irony. Here we are, just an interesting little intersection that I've come to. Some narrow streets. Now here's what I like, a narrow street, a cross street that's narrow, and notice how that street curves to the right, just drawing you down there to wonder what's along and beyond that turn. I could have told you it's two old ladies and Marilyn. I think it's interesting. Here's a commercial laundry. with arches and pillars and vases, and here displayed plates. A little narrow street where people live and hang their laundry out, and yet there are very lovely shops on the bottom floor. Too cool. So just wandering my way back to my hostel, the cathedral not more than a block away across the main street behind me, I saw this down a side street and pursued it. This is the value of serendipitously walking randomly throughout the city on your way home. Look at the detail on the worked stones at the base. Is that original? The bases oftentimes are original, because that's what's left standing after everything's been cannibalized. Here we have a chewed up wall for some reason, and that arch there. The part that's brick is usually what's been filled in during a restoration. Again, the intriguing thing is to look for the depressions in the wall that suggest prior uses, like those two little square rectangulars, and then notice this horizontal line across here and there. Notice that square rectangular, horizontal rectangular, perhaps to hold some kind of post that came out to turn this into a little shop with an awning or something. Now these holes are pigeon roosts. Who'd have thought when they carved this out that that's what those things would be used for? These were part of original wall and tower. You wonder what these were for. Notice all the way up this wall are horizontal lines of square holes that were probably used for additional flooring. Another narrow street. The pension. You can stay in any environment you want. Part of the building I'm going to pan down is interesting just because of how curious it is. What it probably represents is the remnant of another building or archway or something that came off of that in an earlier time. I think I may have seen this before, either that or something like it, but pretty on this street of palm trees. Another park not too far from my hostel. I have no idea what the purpose of this once was. So here's more underground parking apparently. Back end of an early Romanesque church. Like either this church or the people in this neighborhood have a little garden. I think it may be that church. And that this park surrounds it.